Okay, for the last part of our project, we are going to learn how to seal the back up. So after I rinsed the fabric and removed the stabilizer, I placed it back into my hoop and worked around to straighten it, tighten it, center it, however it worked to feel good in the hoop. And then I try to tighten this as much as I can. Some of these hoops do have a little section right here where you can use a little tiny screwdriver to help tighten, which is really helpful. This one, for example, actually doesn't, but most of the ones I use do. So that is something I do use, but you can really just use your own strength to tighten it up there. And it's, you know, it's not super hard to tighten. The little screwdriver trick is just simply just a little trick for added security. But once you get it in there and it feels good and centered, you're gonna have all this extra fabric around the edges here that you don't really need. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut it. You could use your scissors that you use for cutting your thread, or if you have any larger scissors at home, you can use those. So I'm just gonna go around and trim. You don't want to get too thin around the edges because you're going to want to use some of the fabric on the back to stitch with to close it up. And there are a few different methods for closing up the back of the hoop that you can even find a bunch of videos on how to do that. But this is the method that I prefer and the one that I do most often. So that is what I'm going to show you here. So I'm cutting around the edge to make a nice circle. And you can feel free to scrap this fabric, this extra fabric. So you don't need it anymore. So it's already looking more finished as we go. So you can turn over to the back. And what I do is I typically take a piece of felt, and I take the inner circle before I put my project back in the hoop. I take the inner circle and I trace the outline of it to get this circle on felt. And that is essentially just gonna go right over this because you want it to cover the outside of this hoop just to get the sizing correctly. Some people also get an extra piece of fabric to put inside the hoop like this, that you can do just for extra backing if you'd like. You don't have to do that. It's really up to you. And you know, if you're gonna be hanging your project up on a window, you might want to add that so the light doesn't filter in. But typically you can add this step or skip it, but in this case we're skipping it. And what we're gonna do is we're going to stitch this fabric. This is kind of used as our stabilizing fabric, if you will, to attach the felts onto the back. So we're going to set this aside for now because we're going to cut our thread to use to stitch for this. So in this case, I'm just using a neutral thread color, like an egg crew or any sort of like tan color. Or you can, you know, match as closely as you can to the felt that you have or the fabric that you're using, or you can go crazy and put some fun colors back there. It really is up to you. It doesn't really matter because it's on the back of the project. But the way I usually like to measure how much thread I need is I just start making a circle around the hoop with the thread, and I usually do about 2 loops to get the right size, because we're gonna be doing something like a back stitch. So it kind of uses double the thread. I'm gonna take that, and then I'm going to pull out 2 strands to work with, because that, you don't really need anything thicker than that, because like I said, it is just the back and it's just securing that felt on there. So pulling it apart carefully, working my way down. Okay, so I'll put my extra strands aside. We're not going to fold this in half or anything. You can, if you want to do that other method like I taught earlier, then you would want to do 4 wraps around the hoop, but in this case we could just do a nice little knot. Doesn't have to be perfect, 'cause it's going to be hidden anyway. So just make sure it's, you know, nice and tight there. I already have my needle threaded, or I'm sorry, my needle on the threader. I'm going to put my 2 strands through here. Pull this through. Give yourself a decent tail. And this is how we do it. So the beginning of this can be a little tricky. So I'm going to take the felt, like put my thumb under on this fabric here, place my felt on top, and then flip my felt over. So there's this little overlap right there. And then I'm going to stick the needle through both pieces of fabric and bring it out on this side until it catches at the knot on the other side like that. And then you can bring your thumb out from that point and try to lay this over as evenly as possible. And you'll be working and straightening and working through it as you go along. But once your thread is secured in there, you're just gonna go up like this and catch that fabric on the inside and pull it through. And then we're just gonna put the thread over like this again. And then we're just gonna repeat this same method. Bring it a little closer so you can see. So I stick it through here and make sure it's catching this extra loose fabric on the hoop. And then it creates this little line here. And then you're really just gonna keep going around, doing the same thing, tucking this fabric under, and keep making sure your felt is still laying flat and even to the circle as you're moving along. And the fabric underneath is gonna bunch in some places, but you're not really gonna see it because you're gonna keep tucking it under. The first few stitches can be a little tricky, and you wanna, make sure you're getting it as steady and even as possible. You just work your way around, and you can make them close together. You can make them further apart, but I do them relatively close together just so I'm making sure I'm really getting everything. Yeah, so as I go along, I kind of tuck it under, lay the felt on top, and I just keep going around in my circle. Like I said before, just keep, your felt's naturally gonna pull this way as you're going towards where you're pulling the thread from, but I still try to reposition it as I go along, because once you get to this side, you wanna make sure that there's still felts covering the other end of the hoop. Okay, I'm getting close to the end on my last few stitches. I just wanted to note too, when you stick the needle through the felt, you don't stick it like under that other fabric underneath. I just kind of glide it like across like this. and get it towards the top of that fabric, just enough to cover it. And poke the needle through closer to the wood as possible on the hoop. Once I get to the end here, just do a couple more. Okay, and I usually overlap like a stitch or two from the beginning. And then what I do is I stick the needle through and find and make a little loop to knot it like we've done in the past. Stick it through, get it through the little hoop, and pull it through to knot it. And then I snip it. And your back is finished. Like I said, it doesn't always have to be super perfect. I know there's a couple little wrinkles in here and there, but at least it's just enough to get that back sealed up. And then when you turn it over, this is your beautiful finished project. And you can hang it or display it however you'd like. And that is the end of the DIY series. Thank you so much for watching.